up a dive. Feel the vibe, get ready to ignite. Untold stories in the airways, flying through the night. Experience voices, tales so bold. Streaming live, the truth unfolds. Untold Radio Network, where secrets come alive. New episodes daily, the mysteries thrive. Great guests, super chat, it's so I remember right. Share and subscribe, join the side where truth can't hide. Aliens in the attic, UFOs in the sky. Cryptids lurking, oh my, oh my. Ghosts in the hallway, whispering your name. The paranormal, the unexplained. Become a VIP, get the inside scoop. Unlock the mysteries, be part of the group. Live streaming stories, they're talking to you. Super chats buzzing, join the crew. Untold Radio Network, the secrets come alive. New episodes daily, the mysteries thrive. Great guests, super chat, it's a wild member ride. Share and subscribe, join the side where truth can hide. So if you've got the guts and you want to explore, tune into the Untold, it's what you're looking for. From aliens to ghosts and all that's unseen. Untold Radio Network, where the world's mysteries convene.
Good morning, monsters, and welcome to this week's episode of Monsters on the Edge here on the Untold Radio Network. I am your host, Barnaby Jones from Cryptids, Anomalies, and the Paranormal Society. Letting you guys know here right away that today's episode is pre-recorded, so if you guys are watching this live on YouTube, as we normally do, and have questions or comments that are getting ignored, that's why we are not here in studio today. Coming up, guys, this October, if you want to come out and do some investigating with my team, we have investigations all October long on Sundays, Mondays, and Tuesdays at Bean Snapper's Haunted Gentlemen's Club. That's right, guys. We are going to be doing paranormal investigations. The building is over 100 years old, passed down for 4 generations before finally being sold outside of the family in 1993. There is all kinds of paranormal activity, and it has been featured on the television series My Haunted Hometown. So if you're interested in coming out and having a spooky good time this October, head on over to hauntedbeansnappers.com and get all the information. I'm going to be speaking at the Shawano County Library, the Brownsville Public Library, and the Neenah Public Library this October 16th, 22nd, and 25th, respectively. If you want more information on these events, head on over to wisconsincaps.com and click on the public events page. And we are doing paranormal, exploring the paranormal, followed by paranormal investigations of the library. So I know for a fact that the Brownsville Library and the Shawano Library have both reported paranormal activity in these locations. So if you're interested in that, head on over to our page and check that out. I want to remind you all again, we are pre-recorded today. With that being said, let's introduce our guest. Joining us on today's show, he was raised in the rugged Appalachian region of East Tennessee. Harley Owens began as a typical hardworking blue-collar worker and avid outdoorsman, hunting, fishing, and exploring forested woodland areas. But on September 23rd, 2020, a startling encounter at the sawmill near Pound, Virginia, shook his worldview. He discovered massive footprints, photographed an unknown large hair-covered creature, and heard eerie, inhuman vocalizations. This experience, captured in a single shaky photo before his phone died, spurred a 3-year hiatus from the woods until Thanksgiving 2023, when he mustered the courage to return and overcome what he thought was a fear of Bigfoot. Since reclaiming his path, Harley has fully embraced field research head-on. He's captured additional evidence, footprints, photos, and audio documenting multiple encounters with Bigfoot and even Dogman in the Smoky Mountains. His work is rooted in authenticity and transparency as he shares firsthand findings without sensationalism. Harley founded Bigfoot Reports and Data, a community-driven group on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube dedicated to gathering and analyzing cryptid sightings and evidence from Appalachia. He's a sought-after guest on cryptid-focused podcasts such as Strangeology and The Confessionals, as well as YouTube series like Beyond BMR and Bigfoot Society, where he discusses his encounters, field techniques, and his journey from skepticism to active researcher. And he joins us today. Please welcome Harley to the show. Welcome, man. How are you doing?
Oh man, I'm hanging in like a hair on a biscuit. Tired from work, but hey, it's just part of the territory, and I'm glad we could be here and do this pre-record. Unfortunately, we couldn't do it live or nothing like that because my crazy work schedule. So we're making it happen here tonight.
Oh, absolutely. I'm excited. I'm not so excited about that hair on the biscuit, though. I don't know.
It's a southern thing. It's a southern thing.
I'm going to watch my biscuits next time I'm down there, then.
Well, it's a saying, I mean, that's just how I was brought up and raised. We've always got these sayings. And, the saying that I really never believed growing up was that you better watch out for the boogers. And, well, I've since learned that the boogers are out there.
Did you have any interest in those before you had this encounter?
No, I thought it was just the biggest crock of BS there ever was. And September 23rd, 2020 changed all that for me. But there was an instance when I was younger. I was like maybe from 10 to 12 years old, somewhere in that range. I was out helping my dad split firewood one night, and we heard what sounded like a big cat screaming. And he was telling me that's a panther. And I was like, okay. So I'm going inside. Black panthers have been stories that I've always heard about here in Appalachia, East Tennessee, and all around. And so the one I'll never forget was my 6th grade history teacher. He was out on a date with this little girlfriend at the time, and they were on a road called Stinking Creek. And they pulled off, and all of a sudden this big black cat jumps up on the hood, and it's sitting there looking in the car at him with these big yellow eyes. And so that was what really made me begin to understand and comprehend, these big black cats are out there. Some people my dad worked with has got pictures of them on trail camera or heard them or seen them, so that was really the only thing that I took seriously. And then I was probably about 13 or 14, somewhere in that age. And we had some hogs that were getting ready to take to the slaughterhouse to get some meat. And we had 15 or 16 of them. And they were all in the range about 250, 300 pounds. And one night, the hogs just started going crazy. The dogs were going crazy. And Dad was like, well, I'll just go check on them in the morning. He told my mom. And that next morning, my dad went down there to check on them. And he came back up to the house because I was getting ready for school. And he said, you need to come help me bury these hogs. And I said, bury the hogs? He said, yeah, every one of them's dead, just torn to shreds, weren't even eaten on, just unalive for sport, essentially. And I was like, well, that's weird. And still to this day, like, I've never seen anything like it. Like these just huge claw marks on these hogs, and just why would something do that and not eat them? And so it was either that same day when we lost the hogs, or the day after, there was apparently a Bigfoot that was shot in Georgia, and they stuffed it in the freezer chest, and then it turned out to be a big hoax. And then that was like, oh, okay, this is all just a bunch of bullcrap. These things aren't real. And so I never really thought anything about it. Going through high school, I competed on a high school fishing team. I fished all 4 years for Campbell County High School. Got some hardware in the school trophy case. I competed at a national level. Then it came to graduating high school. I didn't want to go off to college, although I had some colleges that wanted me to come fish on their fishing team. And I just said, take with it. I want to get straight to work, start making money. And my dad wanted me to go into lineman school. And I didn't want to do what my dad done. Well, here I am now. I'm doing it. But at that point in time, I just went to work for my parents as neighbors. They had an auction company named Tri-State Auction Realty. And what we done was we traveled around these sawmills in the middle of nowhere and auctioned them off. And that was how I came to have my encounter with a Bigfoot.
Wow. That's amazing. So I'd like to go back here before we get into any of this other stuff and talk a little bit about the black cats, because this is a cryptid that, it's out there. This is the epitome of cryptid. It's not necessarily always a Bigfoot or, lake monsters and all these that we think of. It's creatures that don't exist that do. And there are so many sightings of these things. So looking forward now in all of your research of Bigfoot and the Dogman and stuff now, have you come across any other evidence, any other sightings, reports of these things down there?
Oh, yeah. I've found footprints. I've found where they've actually dug their nails into the trees and scratched the trees. And I've heard them too. When you hear a big cat, it's not like a bobcat. It's something that's a lot bigger than a bobcat. And every hair on your hairs will stand up for a bobcat. But when you hear a bigger cat, it's like, that it's time to get out of there. And there's another story that hit real close to home. One of my cousins, she lived up on a mountain, and she went outside to go smoke a cigarette, and she heard something slightly stepping up towards her, and there was a little bit of a little knoll behind her house, and she seen eyes reflecting from her porch light. And then she turned on her flashlight and looked, and it was a big old black cat just laying there watching her. And she took off inside, running and screaming, and by the time they got back out, it was gone. So I know they're out there. And here's the funny thing. So a buddy of mine is a game warden. I said, if I see one of these things, I can shoot it, right? Oh, no. I was like, so they're not here. I can't answer that. And so it's like, okay, they're here then. He's like, I guess they are. And that's the same thing with the mountain lions. They reintroduced mountain lions back here, but nobody really talks about it. And it's just like, why are they reintroducing the mountain lions? They reintroduced elk back in the late 90s on Hatfield Knob here in East Tennessee. And that was another thing that was really interesting to me, is bringing back the elk. But now the elk are pretty much everywhere. You can drive down the roads now and you'll see elk everywhere. And they do a draw hunt for people to be able to hunt them. And so it makes you wonder, did they bring them back out here for these big cats to predate on? I could see them predating on whitetails, but elk, that's a meatier food source, and now they're everywhere. And so it's like, there's something out here hunting these elk and these deer. It's not just a bear or a pack of coyotes. There's other predators that's out here hunting these things.
So, East Tennessee and Tennessee and stuff is still kind of farther north, kind of mid. But do you think that these things are black cougars, or do you think that they're jaguars coming up? Because we know scientifically there are black jaguars or melanistic jaguars. It's the cougars that are the debated species. There was just from filming this episode, there was actually a jaguar in where the heck was it?
Was it Arizona?
Yeah, I was going to say Arizona or New Mexico over there. That was just captured on trail camera. So we know jaguars come up here. So do you think that these things are melanistic jaguars or melanistic cougars?
I think it could be a little bit of both, honestly. And, with like an exotic pet market, some of these people probably have them as pets and then turn them loose. Actually, not too long ago, on Norris Lake, and if people have a general area of where that is in East Tennessee, somebody caught an alligator while they were fishing. So exotic pets, I mean, when they get too big, people are going to turn them loose. I mean, look what happened in Florida. I mean, much less a hurricane caused that, but I mean, people still, when those animals get too big, they're going to turn them loose. And I could imagine that's the case with some of these big black cats, much less. And you got to think, like, if it in one generation, a melanistic cougar comes out, and if you have another, for the jaguar, who's to say if they don't breed, they'll have black offspring, so it's just like it's all about the genetics, and I guarantee you that could cause a lot of it.
Interesting. Yeah, you're absolutely right with the alligators. Up in Wisconsin here, we have Rock Lake, and there's actually been several alligators captured in Rock Lake. So, and then you have the whole population of monkeys that live down in Florida as well that have been released and stuff. So there's a lot of animals that shouldn't be around that are, but that have kind of taken off. So.
Oh, and that's another thing. Back in 2017 or 2018, there was a farm up in Claiborne County, Tennessee, that had a bunch of red stag, and those red stag got loose. And then they started competing with the elk, fighting the elk it was competition over the fields and stuff. And then they started letting people hunt them, and now all the red stag are gone, and now the elk have taken back over. So, when you bring something that's not meant for the ecosystem to be out there, it's going to cause a lot of environmental issues.
Mm-hmm. Oh, definitely, man. I mean, and you're talking about the breeding population and stuff like that in deer. We have white deer up here, and there's a whole bunch of them in the Wapaka-Wyoega area of Wisconsin here, and there's a whole ton of white deer in these herds in that area. Not just one, but like you can see several of them driving down the road. And I mean, that just shows you right there the genetics and the reproductive of how these things spread. So
exactly right. Whether they come out full white or if they come out as like a piebald and they just have a little bit of white on them. I mean, it just shows that genetic gene pool is strong. Yet some of them will be full albino and some of them won't.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, very interesting. Well, so you okay, so. Let us move on from the kitty cats here and get on to some other stuff. So, well, let me bring this from cats to dogs. So some of these sightings, throwing my pen, some of these sightings of these cougars of the black cats, could they be canine creatures as well? Like, or do you think that those are two totally different things? Like how reliable have your witnesses been? I mean, you're again writing off one anomaly with another, but
yeah. So here in East Tennessee, there's really not too many reports of a large like canine, down on all fours, but there is reports of these dog men. There actually was a report. Who was that? I can't remember. There's somebody that said that they were heard what was hyenas. That from not too close from where my main research area is, they heard hyenas, and that's literally what they said. We are hearing hyenas every night, and it could have been a coyotes, yes, maybe, but they were pretty firm on we're hearing hyenas. So then you have to go back and look at like extinct animals. Okay, so you have, of course, dire wolves and hyenodons and different things like that, or cave hyenas even. Mm-hmm. And then you have to go and wonder, well, are there remnant populations of these things surviving and living in isolated regions around the world? Absolutely. It's absolutely possible. And we know very, very little about what actually roams in our wilderness. I mean, in the Smoky Mountains, for instance, there's hollers in there that nobody has ever stepped foot in, and nobody will ever truly understand what is truly roaming around in the woods. And, there's miles and miles of vast wilderness. And, a lot of people don't really venture too far off the trail. They'll just stay on the trail. But me, for example, I go rucking it. I go way, way off the trail. I have my axe and my machete, and I'll make my way through there, and I put myself in these places for a reason, because no man has ever been in here before. Maybe somebody back in like the old times, but in recent years, I'm probably the only person that's ever set foot in this place. So there's plenty of isolated regions in Appalachia that there could be, these giant canine type creatures. But there is a distinct difference, between a cat and a canine. You got the long curvy tail of a cat, and then, the rounded ears, and then canines, you got pointy ears and a straight tail. So for me, for somebody to just, say, if they say they've seen a cat, they seen a cat. And if they say they seen a canine, they seen a canine, and that's just how I see it, And when you hear people talking about how they see these giant cats, they're firm on it, and there's I know there's red wolves, but they're critically endangered, and actually Colossal Biosciences is trying to build back up the population. Well, since they've brought back a designer dire wolf, I don't really think it's a true dire wolf. It's just a wolf that looks like a dire wolf. And honestly, that's going to be the same way when it comes to the mammoths. They're just going to be an elephant that looks like a mammoth. So I don't care how good they think they are with de-extinction. They're not going to be pure.
Mm-hmm. No, you're absolutely right. It's like, like even looking back at Jurassic Park, everyone, it's basically what it is. And Michael Crichton was very good on his research when he wrote Jurassic Park. It is very factual research based on science and stuff. And even there, he says, well, we can't bring back dinosaurs. We brought back a designer dinosaur with the frog DNA and splicing and stuff. And that's exactly what bioscience is doing. If they don't have a viable egg and a viable sperm to create this, I mean, if you do, more power to you, you're going to have the original. But without those two components, or a full DNA sequence, you're not going to be able to bring that species back as an authentic species. So.
Yeah, unless, like we said, there is an isolated population of these things somewhere, and they're just not telling us about this isolated population of these dire wolves or these mammoths or whatever the case may be. Like in I don't know if you've ever seen the video, but there was a video going around of this dog that was chasing this wolf that was laying down flat, and then that thing stands up, and that thing was a lot bigger than a normal wolf. So I tend to think if that's not a pure dire wolf, that is something that in the genetics, like gigantism or something like that, that caused that wolf to be that big, because that wolf it made that dog look puny.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I have seen that video, and I've looked at it, and I don't know. It could be, some sort of a, editing or something, but if it's
I don't think it was edited. That looks pretty legit.
It's a big boy. So we had, my team had actually gotten to go down to Tennessee and Kentucky and stuff, and Benham and Lynch County and stuff. That's where my mom actually saw a Bigfoot of her own. And right after we had been down there, I want to say it was a week or two after that, there was a report of a dog man, an upright canine, right where we had just been. And we're like, oh man. So that's crazy. That's crazy stuff down there. And you're absolutely right. Like it's a different world. Because when my mom had the sighting and we tried to track it across the road, there's a thing that you guys got down there called kudzu.
Yep.
And for anybody that hasn't seen it, you would not believe how, 1 foot off the trail, you can't see nothing.
Yep. And that's like in the Smokies, even, there's the mountain laurels, the rhododendron, they're everywhere, and it's exactly like the kudzu. It doesn't, I mean, the kudzu will die off during the wintertime, but the mountain laurels, they don't. They stay green year round, and it's excellent cover for any large predator, even deer, for instance, any kind of prey animal. They're going to hide in there and stay hidden, and you won't even know they're there.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely is a different world down there. And this, to point out another thing, like being a different world down there, I don't think a lot of the people from, Kentucky, Tennessee are much like practical jokers or BSers. Like it's kind of like a no BS kind of place. If you're not from these little,
it's the Bible Belt, man. It's nothing but the truth and the whole heart of the truth.
So if they see something, they're not going to BS you about like, oh yeah, I saw this down there. They're not even gonna tell you, with a lot of these.
No, they'll keep it hush hush. They won't talk.
Yeah.
They will not talk. And that was me, man. Because when I had that first encounter, I stopped talking about it. Because I got home and I faced the most ridicule that I ever faced in my life. I told my parents about it. I showed them everything, and they were like, "Oh, well, that's this, or this," and it's everything other than what it was. And then it got to the point of telling my friends. Well, you find out who your friends are after high school. Everybody knew my truck, and they were taking pictures or videos of my truck and posted it on social media. Oh, I wonder if he's got Bigfoot on his truck, because I had big fancy wheels and tires on my truck. Everybody knew my truck, so it was like a big joke to them, and I ended up just shutting up about it. Mm-hmm. And for 3 years, from 2020 to 2023, it just consumed me. And in August of 2023, I woke up one night and I had a nightmare. My wife was worried about me. And she was asking me what was wrong, and I told her everything that had happened. And she was like, you've got a story that needs to be told. And I was like, well, I don't know how to do it. I don't know where to go to tell it. And I started looking, and I found Bigfoot Society, and that was the very first Bigfoot podcast that I'd ever done. And it went from there. And I was like, I can be a voice for somebody, that way they know they're not alone, because I thought I was alone. And it went from there, and I've done many, many podcasts ever since, and I've loved it, and I enjoy meeting everybody. And it's meeting somebody on a podcast and meeting them in person is exactly the same, in my honest opinion, because you can get a feel on who they are, and I don't take it for granted one bit, because the friendships I build on the podcast that I go on, they've lasted ever since. And the Bigfoot community is very resilient, and people stick together. And yeah, there's some trolls out there, but the good outnumber the bad, in my opinion.
Absolutely, man. So we've talked about like the kudzu and how thick this area and stuff is. So you get out there in these areas, and back on these areas that are obviously very, very hard to get to. So tell us about like where, not necessarily where, you don't have to give out specific locations, but where are you going to look for this stuff? Like, what kind of research area are you interested in? What's the landscape like?
I'll actually pull up a picture for you to put on here if you want.
Sure.
Let's see if I can pull it up. But what I look for is an area that's got plenty of cover. So for me, it would be the mountain laurels, the rhododendron. There's got to be some water sources, whether it be a creek or a small lake, anywhere that they're going to try and remain hidden. Let's see if I can find this picture here. I got. Let's see. There's plenty of places. Let's see. There is an area that has 2 cemeteries where I research at. And there's a lot of high strangeness behind it, paranormal stuff, orbs, and what I believe to be feral people in this area. The feral people are a whole different ball game, and quite frankly, I hope I never encounter one of those. But my stepdaughter's dad actually had an encounter with a feral person not too far from this area. And he was trout fishing, and he had okay, here we go. Yeah, right here. So this is kind of an area that it should be on your screen now, I think. Yeah, there we go. So I get out way, way, way out in the middle of nowhere, miles away from any trail. And what I do is I'll mark my trails, and that way I know which way to go back. And sometimes what I'll do too is I'll chop down some small trees, and I'll make like a little line that I can follow back out. But anyways, back to this feral person story. So he was fishing, and he had this feeling that he was being watched, and he turned around and looked, and he seen this person peeking out from behind a tree looking at him, and it hid. And he said that he went further down the creek away from this thing, and he started back fishing again, and he really had this feeling that he was being watched. And about 30, 35 feet behind him, he turned around. And this butt naked, mangy looking human was sitting there right behind him. And it had one of its arms behind its back. And he was sitting there looking at him. And he said the next thing it done, it threw down a big rock and it took off running away from him. And he said he left his fish and he took off running too. And, the thing with me was, I was pretty firm that he had seen a Bigfoot. And I was like, are you sure it wasn't a Bigfoot? He said, no, this was a person. He said it was a butt naked, mangy, dirty person. So I was like, okay. And he had fear in his eyes. So I have no doubts that he has seen one of them feral people.
Yeah, when we were down there, we were talking to some locals and stuff, and we said, okay, we're going out in these areas for Bigfoot. Has there been any reports or anything and stuff like that? And they said, well, if you're going out in the woods, be careful. And we're like, oh, are there bears, cougars in the air? And they said, no, there's people. And it just hits so different, because there's the stories of like the blue people down there and all these things and the moonshiners and it's crazy stuff. I wonder, bringing this up though, the feral people, I wonder how many of these sightings, right? So if you have an encounter with something throwing rocks or making noise or something and they think it's Bigfoot, I wonder how many of these non-visual sightings are actually just feral people, which is just as, cryptid-esque,
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely think that some of it could be, and I definitely think that can be in some instances where you're being paced out by these things. Could it have been Bigfoot? Yes. Could it have been the feral people? Yes. It's kind of just like a flip of a coin, and yeah, we know that Bigfoot will mimic stuff, and who's to say that these feral people don't do the same thing? And much less like when you hear the samurai chatter, who's to say that it ain't these feral people? And and there'll be instances like where I'll be hiking up a trail, and it'll sound like there's people talking up ahead of me, and I'll keep going, and there's nobody there, and like I'll be looking around, and I'm like, well, that's just weird. Because it literally sounds like there's people having a conversation and then there's nobody coming or going. So it's definitely a rabbit hole, and it's something that I try not to look into, because if you ask me, a feral human would probably be a lot worse to run into than a bear.
Oh yeah.
Bear you can scare off. You just make a black bear you can scare off pretty easy. You just make yourself look bigger and make a lot of noise, and they'll go on about their day. Unless they're in Gatlinburg, those bears do not care about people.
Well, you said you haven't tried to go down these rabbit holes, but I'm super curious. Like, where did these feral people come from? Are they, are they breeding out in the wild? Are they people that just, like homeless? Are they, I'm not politically correct, but are they like on drugs or something? Where do they come from?
I've heard several different theories, and I think that some of them were probably the ones that lived on the land, and when the government took over and made it the national park, they decided they just weren't going to leave, and they stayed there. And probably the same way with the Indians. The Indians, some of them probably didn't leave. They went for the hills, and they stayed. And I ultimately think that's probably what it is. And, when it comes to people doing drugs and stuff like that, I would not put it past them. Now, moonshiners, on the other hand, I don't think that's any reason to worry about the moonshiners unless you come across their steel. But I think that the feral people are probably remnants of the people that used to live in those areas, and they didn't want to leave their homes. And the Indians the same way.
I wonder if they've gone feral, or if they always, like, they never were, like a lost tribe or something, like, because you're talking about these hollers and stuff that people have never been in. Who's to say that there's not indigenous people living in there that are unmarked by modern society? You know what I mean?
That very well could be the case. It could be just a lost tribe or something. That very well could be the case. Some kind of remnants of the Cherokee or something like that. I mean, who knows? It could be anything. Never rule anything out. That is my motto. Anything is possible.
Especially down in Appalachia there.
Oh man, there's so much crazy stuff in Appalachia. In my other research area that I recently found. So I didn't realize it was there until I started looking on Google to try and find some other areas. And I read 2 Google reviews from 2 different people. The first one came from 2022, and the witness was driving down the road, and where this trailhead is, it butts right up next to the main road. And he said that this giant winged moth creature thing flew out in front of him. And what he put on Google was, I was driving down the road and this giant moth flew out in front of me. And I was like, okay, is that Mothman or is that something else? You know, because Mothman's typically a harbinger of doom. And so in 2023, before I even got into doing the research or anything, it was in that summer, there was a woman and her friend. They drove out the trail up towards this cemetery, and they had parked, and it was a moonlit night, and they're sitting there and they see this large black shadow walking towards the vehicle, and it probably gets about 15, 20 feet away from the vehicle, and this thing unfurls its wings and it lets out a shriek. Well, I have tried every way in the world to get this woman to talk to me, and for 2 years now, nothing. And she apparently moved from there to California. So she moved from Tennessee to California after this encounter. But it was 8.5 feet tall, blacker than the night, had wings, and shrieked like a banshee. So
Wonder why she moved.
that wasn't a very smart move, in my opinion.
That's weird. I don't know. Interesting. Anyway, oh man, that's crazy. That's crazy stuff down there, man. So, we have been going for about a half hour here, and we haven't even talked about Bigfoot. So, let's dive into the Bigfoot stuff here.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
What have you experienced? What have you found? What do you got going on down there for your research?
Oh man, there's a lot. There is a lot. So I started doing the boots on the ground December 7th. I didn't have any idea how to do Bigfoot research or anything like that. So I looked up Bigfoot research in Tennessee, and Scott Carpenter's name had pulled up. Or I don't know if you're familiar with Scott Carpenter, but he was a researcher from here in East Tennessee. And I was like, okay, I can get in touch with this guy. But unfortunately, he passed in August of 23. And I was like, well, I need to find somebody. And I messaged his son. I ended up finding his son, Travis T-Cart. And I got a hold of him, and we were talking, and we've since become very good friends. And he kind of gave me some areas of where to go to. And this area that I've found that Scott has been in, and it is unbelievable. There's so much activity. There's so many tree structures. And actually, there's this area that there's a holler that goes down from past. There's a cemetery, and this holler shoots straight down in beside of it. And it butts up into another holler that shoots straight up the mountain. And then it goes back down in towards like where the main road is. And there is a hog cage there. This hog cage out in the middle of nowhere. Big metal hog cage. How does a big hog cage get out in the middle of nowhere with no roads? But the kicker was, when I first found this cage, it was sitting on its top, and the door was ripped off. And so it made me question, how did this cage get out here? Because it was everything I could do to try and move this thing, and it made me scratch my head, because this didn't make sense. How does this hog cage get out here? But there is a little bit of another backstory behind this location. I'm not sure what year this had happened. There was a park ranger out there weed eating and taking care of the cemetery, and he stopped to take a break, and he heard something coming up from the woods down in that holler. And he looked, and he seen this woman that was butt naked, and she had huge claw marks all over her. and he rushed her to the nearest hospital, and he had left. And by the time he almost gets back to this location, the hospital calls him back and tells him that she will not talk to anybody but you. You need to get back here. And by the time he gets back to the hospital, she's gone. And so he tells them to go back and look at the security footage to see where she went. They go back and look at the security footage. These black SUVs pull up. These men in black suits get out. They go into the hospital. They get this woman, and that woman has never been seen or heard from since. And so what was that woman attacked by? You know, if it was a bear, why would these people take her? You know, and just it's just this area is just so strange. We've recorded roars, different kinds of vocals in here, whistles, mimic them. We've got a documentary film coming out called Operation Smoke. It was myself, Justin Doc Brown from Prometheus Lens podcast, Drewski and the Cryptid Warfare Operations and Survival Team, Jessica Jones, the Cryptid Huntress, Riley Watson from Midwest Mythos, and Kevin from Where the Weird Ones Are. We all got together, and back in April, we went out into this area and we had a big camp out. There was about 12 or 13 of us out there. And the first night, you know, nothing really too crazy happened. We heard these things mimicking owls. You know, there's a distinct difference between an owl and a Bigfoot. You know, like I said, I've grown up hunting and fishing. I know the sounds of the woods, and these owl calls were not owls. Like, it was like, oh, wow. It's like, it was not a normal owl. It sounded like a retarded owl was what it sounded like. And they were doing that a couple of times, and we actually got that recorded. And so the other team had some stuff happening to them. They were being paced through the woods, and Brian and Juan were standing back to back, and Brian said that something blowed on his neck area, around his shoulder and his neck, just like it felt like something just right on the side of his neck. And so there was a lot of strange stuff happening on this first night. It then became a monsoon on us, and then Saturday rolls around. We go down into the area. Since we didn't make it all the way down in there, we all go in one big group down to the main area where this hog cage was, and we're finding tracks. We find this 22-inch print. We find 16, 17-inch tracks. We find all kinds of different footprints. We're finding these tree structures, and this one tree structure that we had found, it was all bent and twisted around in all kinds of weird ways. And I can't spoil too much about it, but if y'all want to know more about this story, there will be a documentary coming out about this. And if you haven't, be sure to check out Prometheus Lens. It's all going to be on there. He's the one doing all the editing and stuff on this, and it was a wild trip. And there was I can definitely hook you up with a couple of people that went on this trip, and they can tell their side of the story about what all happened. And I can't spoil too much, and I'll leave it as a cliffhanger for there. And the biggest, you know, there's different variety sizes of the prints that I've found. You know, some of them are more narrow, like a human track, but then the other ones, you know, they're wide. And there was one, the very first one that I was successfully able to cast, because I had tried to cast others before this one and they did not go so well. It was me, my buddy Rick, and his niece. We went out there, and this was after Hurricane Helene had hit, and we're sitting out there, and all of a sudden we're sitting here looking at this sandbar, and there's some small tracks, maybe like that big. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, this is a baby, you know, this is a baby Bigfoot print. And then I'll hear Rick say, Harley, look at this. And I come over there and I look, and there's a little bit of a knoll like this, and there's just this huge print that's just sucked down into it. And I was like, oh my gosh. It was 17 inches long, 11 inches at the toes and 6 inches at the heel. I don't know if I have a picture of it on here or not, but that was the first successful cast that I casted in this area. And that was just like a huge sigh of relief for me. And I'm not going to lie, I cried. I did, because it was just so real and so wholesome to me to finally, after a whole almost a year of doing field research, I finally got a footprint, and it was just so awesome to have. And it was a trip that I will never forget. I will say go Vols, because I ended up going Bigfooting that day because Tennessee was playing Alabama, and I figured we were going to get beat, but we ended up winning, and I ended up getting my first Bigfoot track. Let's see. Let me find that print. I think I've got it on here. I got too many pictures. I probably should have found these earlier, but
that's all right.
But I will say that the main reason that I met Rick was because he had heard about my Dogman encounter. And Rick has been coming down with me ever since. And Rick, I will tell that this story right here is just phenomenal. So we go out and we do a night investigation. We didn't stay out all night. We stayed till about 2-3 o'clock in the morning. And we're sitting there, and it was the day of the Republican convention, and we were sitting there listening to Hulk Hogan talk. He was on the phone with his wife, and all of a sudden this thing roars. And I looked at Rick, and Rick looked at me, and we both had this same expression on our face, like our jaws were just dropped. And he said, I gotta go. We got this thing roaring at us. And we ended up getting out on recording. The only bad thing about that recording is the cicadas were out, but you could hear this thing over just a little bit over the cicadas. And there's another instance on where Rick and them came out, and it was in October or November, and we were out, and we're sitting there. Well, that was before. Was it before? Okay, it was before I got there, because I was running a little late. I had some errands to run. And right before I had got there, they were sitting there right at the edge of the woods, and they hear this deep reverberating growl, and it sounds like it's right on top of them. And they're sitting there and they're turning their lights on and everything, and there's nothing there. And that was pretty much all that had happened that first night. But the second night, I wasn't able to come at all. I had to watch my kids because my wife had to go to work. And they called me and they were freaking out, and I was like, what's going on? And they're like, we'll meet you to talk about it. And so I ended up meeting them, and what had happened was they heard somebody hollering for help. And then almost after they heard that somebody hollering for help, it sounds like it's a lot closer. And so Stephen had his firearm, and he's pulling it out, and he's already chambering around. He doesn't know what's going to go down. And so he heads to the right of the cemetery area, and he's sitting there shining his light, and he sees this large black shadow moving through the laurels, and it's gone. And they were all pretty shaken up. What that was, I don't know. There is talk of there being skinwalkers in Appalachia. I don't know. I tend to think that's more of a Western thing, but could it be possible out here? Absolutely.
You got some crazy stories, man. So let me back up here. Let me back up here. So you said that you met Rick because he heard about your Dogman encounter. So what's your Dogman encounter?
January 29th of 2024.
Just that right there.
January 29th of 2024. Me and my wife had an argument. So I told her I was going to go out and hike a little bit and blow off some steam. That trip changed everything on a spiritual level, on all sorts of levels for me. So I left, And I think I made my mind up that I was going to go to my normal area. Well, as I'm sitting there driving, it was a 20-minute drive from my old house. And as I'm sitting there driving, I'm about halfway there. I ended up pulling out my phone and looking on the map to try and find somewhere else to go to. And here I am now, pretty much still been researching the same area. But I ended up going to these other two locations. So in this trip, distinctly, I remembered that there was something off. And I said a quick little prayer. I didn't think nothing about it. I just had this little gut feeling that I needed to do something, and I did it. And so I get to this first area. I get out and I hike around for about 20, 30 minutes, and I'm finding these ground glyphs, as they call them, where the Bigfoot will stack these trees on the ground, flat, and they'll make these glyphs, as people call them. And I found one that was in the shape of an asterisk. And so I'm sitting there, I'm like, these trees are about that big around, there's no human who's going to do that. And I'm just dumbfounded, because I'm still green at this point in the research. I'm still learning and all this. And I'm like, okay, this is promising, because these trees were still alive. And I'm walking around furthermore in that area, and I'm finding these rock stacks. And they're always in threes. It's never four or never two. It's always in threes. And I don't know why they do that, but it's always been threes. And it's so I'm sitting there walking around a little bit more, and I'm like, okay, there's some stuff here, I may come back, I might not. So I go back to the truck and I head further up the mountain. And I get out and I hike this trail towards a waterfall. I'm going along through there, I'm zigzagging, and I get to a point on the trail where I come down and I cross this washed out culvert. And there's a hill that goes up, and I'm going up the hill, and the trail kind of winds off. The trail to the right wasn't maintained very well by Park Services, but the trail to the left was upkept, and I was like, okay, I guess I'm going this way. So as I'm going up that trail, and I see this big game trail cut straight across the trail. You can see where it was heavily used. It was going straight across the main trail and was going over and to the right. I was like, okay, I'll just walk over in here and look around. So as I'm walking out through there, I see these twist brakes. Now, some of the twist brakes can be from natural causes, from tornado or whatever the case may be. But for there to just be two of them in an area, that threw some red flags for me. Okay, so I'm 6'6", and the one that I could almost reach up and touch, I'd say it was 8.5, 9 feet. It was twisted and broken and facing up the mountain. The other one was double that height, and it was twisted and broken facing down the mountain. And I'm sitting here and I'm like, okay. And I'm looking around at all these other trees, and I'm like, this is not a tornado. Why are these two trees broke, and there is no other trees broke around this? I was like, this is not from wind. This is not from a tornado. Something with hands twisted these trees and broke them. So I ended up looking around some more in that area, and I had actually found a smaller type little structure that I believe that the juveniles do. I think the juveniles watch the adults, and they'll make these smaller little makeshift structures. So I head back to the main trail, and I come up, and there's a curve, and then there's a little bit of a straightaway, and then there's a real sharp curve, and then another little straightaway, and it makes another sharp curve. So I'm standing there, and I'm trying to send my wife my location. There's no phone service, and I'm trying to send her my location over the satellite, and it finally sends. And I get up to that first curve, and I checked my phone, and it said I had like 35, 36% battery. And I come around the curve, and I get in that next little straightaway, about to go into the next curve, and I check my phone again, and it said 10% battery, and it shut off. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, okay, this is deja vu, because what happened when I saw my first Bigfoot was I took a picture of it, and the phone shut off. And it finally came back on after this thing was gone. But this is what happened here. My phone shut off again. I'm probably going to see another Bigfoot, because I'm seeing the signs, and I may run across one. So I was sitting there, and I had a decision to make. I said, I can either turn around and go back, or I can keep going further up. Well, at this point in time, it starts to snow a little bit, flurry a little bit. I just had on a hoodie, some jeans, and my muck boots. I just think I just had a hat. I don't even think I had a toboggan on. and it was starting to get colder. And I was like, I'm scrawny. I ain't no big buff boy, but I was starting to get cold, and I was like, I'm going home. So I turned around. I came back around this little curve, and I'm going down the straightaway, almost into the next little curve. And I stopped because I heard movement behind me to the right. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to stop. I'm going to turn, and this thing's going to be there, and it's going to be a Bigfoot. I've never said more wrong words in my life. And when I turned around and locked eyes on this thing, it was a dark brown wolf, essentially. It was laying down flat on the ground, and it was looking at me. And it had these big, bright yellow eyes, dude. Like, it was just... it's almost like they were illuminating, but not. But this thing then proceeds to push itself up with its forearms, and it takes 3 steps to a tree, and it props one of its hands up on the tree and digs its nails into it. And it's taking the other one, and it's like playfully, like acting like it's trying to get me. And since then, since I went back to that area, it was 8 feet tall, not including the ears. It was 46 inches at the shoulder. And from where it was laying to the tree that it took 3 steps to was 28 feet. It was dark brown, had ears like a German Shepherd, had a face kind of like a wolf. The upper half of its body was very buff and broad. And the lower half of its body was thinner. Had forward-facing legs like a human. It didn't have no backward-facing legs like Hawk or nothing like that. It had a big poofy tail like a fox's. But the craziest thing to me was its hands. The hands were like a raccoon, but bigger. Just a giant. You take a raccoon's hands and amplify it to fit on a bigger creature, and that's what its hands look like, straight out of a raccoon, man. And this thing. So here's my dilemma with the dog man. When I was looking into this thing's eyes, I was having these visions, these premonitions of my wife was going to be a widow without me. My children were going to grow up and graduate without me. I was not going to be a grandparent. All these bad things were happening in my mind. And, I was sitting there frozen in a state of shock. And then I got to myself and I'm like, I got to go. And so I started backstepping, and I just took off running. And this thing is chasing me, but it's not chasing me from the trail. It is chasing me from off the trail. I can hear it crashing through the foliage. And I get down to the culvert area, and I kind of glanced over my shoulder, and I could see it coming through the rhododendron. I go up, and I come around, and I come up to this bridge. And I kind of glanced back over my shoulder again, and it's crashing through the laurels. And I'm almost positive that was when it stopped following me. I don't know for sure, but all I know is that I got the hell out of Dodge. And then that was when I was debating on stopping doing the research. And that was then how Rick got a hold of me. And 4 days after I seen this thing on February 2nd, I seen it January 29th. I went back February 2nd with my now good friends Rick Atcheston and Stephen Woods. We went out there and got the measurements and all that stuff, and it was unreal, man. For something to be that big and move that fast, and it was unreal. From where it was laying to the tree that it took those 3 steps to was 28 feet. That's an 8.5 foot stride. It's insane that something that big can move that fast. But here's the kicker. Where this thing was laying at, the compass was going haywire. In that exact spot where this thing was laying at, it was spinning. And that makes me wonder, like, is this some kind of interdimensional creature? Is this something else? Like, what is this thing? But much less, I went back and looked at it again on the map. And where this thing was smack dab in the middle of 2 old cemeteries. There was no headstones or anything like that. No sign of even cemeteries being up there. It was just right smack dab in the middle of both of them. So is this thing a hellhound of sorts? Is this something that's guarding these cemeteries, or what is this thing? Because what I saw was something clearly of flesh and blood, but then there was something else about it. And then it's just like, when you look into the eyes of one of these dogmen, it is evil. But when you look into the eyes of a Bigfoot, there is a humanness about those things. If I had my rifle up and I had a Bigfoot in my sights, there's no way I could pull the trigger. But if I had one of those dogmen, oh yeah, it would be down. But there's something about the Bigfoot that there's a humanness about them. And, I fully believe that some of these Bigfoot are good, and I think that some of them are bad. And I think that it ultimately ties in with their genetics and the human that's in them.
Wow. I mean, I laugh because just the thought of this thing leaning up against the tree, playfully kind of toying with you is comical, but to imagine being there and seeing that thing is,
My arm hairs stand up every time I talk about it.
oh my God.
And it tears me up, man. Like, if that thing wanted to, it could have had me. But I ultimately think that there was some divine intervention that day. Because if it wanted me, it could have had me.
Oh yeah.
It's just one of those things that, there is something that is spiritual about some of this stuff, and I ultimately believe that. And I'm not an expert, and I'm never going to claim to be an expert. I'm an amateur as far as I'm concerned. I've only been doing, this year will be my second year of doing, like, my second year anniversary of doing Bigfoot research, and there's always a never-ending questions to be answered.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you got so much stuff going on down there, man. So
hey, if you want to come down one time, man, I'll be more than glad to take you out. We'll camp and we'll have some fun and we'll get some activity.
oh, I have no doubt. So you did a really good job describing this thing. I'm just kind of curious, like, so you said the hands and everything. What does the chest look like? Is it more canine standing up, or was it more like pecs?
Human. It was
And
human. It was human. Like, it was like it had pecs, but it was just covered. It was just covered with hair. It was literally like you see a werewolf in a movie that is as straight up as a dog man as you can get. That, like, I always said there's truth in the science fiction, and I swear by it. Because you see a werewolf in a movie, that's spot on of a dog man, and there's no denying it. There might be a few subtle differences, but that is almost what these things look like as a werewolf out of a movie.
so in the chest, was it really hairy, or was it more sparse? Like on Bigfoots, they tend to like see less hair in the chest, and
It was really hairy. It was just
really
covered with hair. And I actually took to Chat GPT and I visually described it word for word as this thing looked, and it popped out exactly what it looked like, but it made it black instead of dark brown. And I'll pull it up for you right here. And this is it. It gives me goosebumps just looking at it, man. Like, it's. I don't play around with these things because I don't care if I ever see another one. I really don't. I could do without seeing another one because it just puts the fear of God in me, because there's just something that is not right about these dog men. Crap! I thought I had it on here. My Chat GPT ain't wanting to cooperate. Let's see.
So you said this was by like two cemeteries. Is there any kind of military areas in the area as well?
Oak Ridge National Laboratory.
Awesome.
Yeah, I'm sure you've heard a lot of crazy stuff about Oak Ridge.
I actually haven't, but it's really interesting that like there's certain things that are common with Bigfoot sightings and things that are common with Dogman. And the Dogman is mostly cemeteries, quarries, high what do they call power lines, stuff like that, and military bases. So I'm just always curious to see like if this ties in and what else is in the area.
So from what I've heard, I don't know if you're familiar with CERN, or do you know
Yes.
who CERN is? Yeah, apparently CERN is in Oak Ridge National Laboratory, and apparently they've been trying to do things that they shouldn't be doing in there. So it's hit or miss on what you. I mean, there's some things that I can believe, and then there's some other things that I can't. But it's like, why is all this stuff happening here? Like, there's so much crazy stuff happening in East Tennessee. There is another base. I think it's outside of Bristol. But I've heard a lot of crazy stories out of that place too. So it seems like all the military bases have a lot of crazy phenomenon happening.
Mm-hmm. We've had 2 dogman sightings right here in Wisconsin by one of our military bases. One of them actually jumped the fence. Somebody was driving past the front of it, and there's big gates and like, the cement pedestals, like kind of like a cemetery gate, kind of. But they saw one of these dogmen jump over the gates there into the military base. So, yeah.
That's crazy. Okay, go ahead.
I wonder if these creatures with the cemeteries, the military bases, the quarries and stuff, if it's because something to do with that location, or is it because those locations tend to be what's the word? Secluded. Like there's no people around. They're not many people go to cemeteries at night. You don't go to quarries. They're fenced in, guarded military bases. So is it because it's a military base that there's dogmen there, or is it there because nobody else goes there and it's protected?
I think it's a little bit of both. Honestly, I think it is a little bit of both, and I think some of these things are natural, and I think that some of them are assets, as they say. I mean, if you ever heard the Joe Barber story, the truck driver, he shot this dog man, and he goes back to where he shot this thing. It's gone. These people come up to him and told him that you killed our asset. So I think that some of these things are natural, and I think that some of them aren't. But this is the Chat GPT rendition of what I saw. Everything on this thing is correct besides the color. That is what I saw, but it was not black. It was dark brown. That is exactly. I described it word for word into the Chat GPT, and it popped that back out to me, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, everything is right but the color."
I mean, that looks very human. Not facial wise, but the body structure, the muscles, everything in there. It's a very interesting concept to think that
it's weird, monsters aren't supposed to be real, but they are.
Yeah.
I was a normal boy growing up. I didn't believe in monsters, but yet here I am. I'm going out and I'm experiencing this stuff. It shouldn't be real, man. 25 years old. I'm 25 years old, and I've never imagined that I would be out here hunting monsters, and I'm doing it.
Yeah. So you said that when you saw this thing, it was just starting to snow when you turned back, and that was this like what time of day was this sighting?
It was in the evening. It was about 5 o'clock.
Okay, so how much light do you got?
It was getting close to dusk.
Okay, so not quite dark, but just kind of getting there.
Mm-hmm. Yep, and then there was a little bit of a mountain there, but the sun was just now starting to go in over behind it.
So you do all this, yeah. You do all this stuff on your own for the most part. So tell me a little bit about, you said that you were texting your wife your GPS location before your phone died. What other precautions do you take? I mean, are you armed when you go out there? Because, you talked about having cougars, bears and stuff out there, and now these other things. So what does it look like for your preparedness going out there?
I definitely go armed. And I'm also spiritually prepared because, there's ancient spirits and stuff in these mountains, and these are ancient grounds, and you got to be prepared for something to possibly attach itself to you. You have to mentally, physically, and spiritually be prepared for anything to happen. I do go armed, probably not with the right caliber. I carry around the 9 millimeter. But honestly, I really don't. I hope I don't have to put myself in a position to shoot one of these things. Although I'm young and stubborn, and I do put myself in that position, but it's just I don't think I could ever shoot a Bigfoot. I really don't. And if I had another run in like that with one of these dogmen, I'm definitely pulling the trigger. But I'm definitely going to have a bigger caliper, probably a 44. I'm definitely not going to use a 9 because it would probably be like a bee sting. But I keep plenty of water. I keep snacks. I don't really overbear myself. I just keep what I can keep in my pack, and I don't want to strain myself while I'm out there and put myself in a position where I'm too tired to get a hike back out.
Interesting. So looking back at this experience now, do you think that, like you said, if this thing wanted you, it could have had you? So what do you think its motivation was? Do you getting too close to its pack, young ones, or just playful? Was it bored? What do you think the motivation there was?
I think it wanted me out of its territory. I think that area was its, and it was going to make sure that I got out of there. Could there have been young ones around? Absolutely. Could there have been more of them? Yeah, absolutely. Could that one have just wanted to toy with me? Absolutely. I mean, I truly don't know, but it let me live, and a part of me wonders why, and then a part of me wonders why I didn't. So I don't have no answer for that, but all I can do is thank the man upstairs that I'm still here to kind of keep the awareness going that monsters are real, and you just got to be in the right place at the right time to experience this stuff, because there's too much of this and not enough of this.
Absolutely.
Technology is a good thing, but a lot of people just don't have the true grasp of what is actually going on in the national forests and national parks, or heck, even behind their own house.
Mm-hmm. So where this location was, this is an actual like public hiking trail, national park, or was this like a off-road trail? So let's say, like, on average, how many people you think hike that trail like a day a week?
I'd say maybe I've not ran into very many. I'd say maybe 10, 15, if that. Not very many people.
Have you looked to see if there's any other sightings of these creatures in that area?
I have. There is reports that back in 2021 there was 2 dog attacks about 25 minutes away from where this is. It was Tony Aarons and Amber Miller. There was 2. They were both unalive by what they said was a pack of dogs, but there's a lot of debate on that. People say it actually was the dogs, but then if you go and look at the report, it's kind of shady, but who knows? And there's a lot of people that said that there's different stories about what happened. And the one that really stuck me was the one about the homeless camp. There was a homeless camp that wasn't too far from where these 2 people lost their lives. And there was a YouTuber that went out there and was talking to these people in this homeless camp. And they told him that you don't need to be out here after dark. They'll get you. So that homeless camp is not there anymore. There's no more homeless people in that area. So who knows?
Wow.
More questions than answers.
Yeah. So this whole area is a national park, though, correct?
Yes. No, well, where those 2 people lost their lives, it was not. It was close to a city. But there's a highway, and then there's a big stretch of woods, and there's another highway, and then there's a national park.
It's very interesting because, if you look back to the creation of the national parks, Theodore Roosevelt created them. And there's this theory that the national parks are actually like preserves for these Bigfoot dogman creatures, and that's why they were established, kind of like Native American reservations. Like, this is your land, you stay there, and we'll stay on ours, kind of thing. And
makes you wonder, man. Makes you wonder.
Oh, absolutely. No, I don't wonder so much. I kind of put things together, but
yeah, piecing the puzzle together. Absolutely. Yeah. I try not to wonder either. I take a puzzle piece from over here and I put it over here. And if that don't fit, then I'll find another puzzle piece and try and connect the dots somewhere else. And for me, being young and all this, and there's something more at hand with all this. And you would think that by now, with all the advancements and stuff that we've got, if these things were just pure flesh and blood, there would be something already. You've got people saying that they're a Gigantopithecus, and that's what I used to think. I used to think Gigantopithecus, but there's just something not adding up. There's just something that's not adding up, and it just every time there's just something that throws a curveball, and it just makes me scratch my head, and I'm just like, well, how does this add up? When I seen my first orb, it was like, well, I've never seen this. Why is there a ball of light moving through the woods when there's Bigfoot out here? It's just, it's craziness. And I just have no words to describe it. And it's a big world. The world is a lot bigger than we could imagine. And I encourage anybody, if you're closed-minded, don't be closed-minded, because it could happen to you at any given moment.
Absolutely, man. Well, you've been an amazing guest here tonight. We have gone a little bit over here, and I don't want to keep you, but I do definitely want to have you back on and share some more stories. So don't be a stranger. Let me know if you guys get any more information.
I'll definitely come back. I'll definitely come back. There's more, and I got to get you out in the woods with me.
Oh yeah, that'd be great, man. That'd be awesome. You got to let me know, shoot me a message with your buddies that do the documentary. Love to have them on as well. When that comes out, we can get like a panel together or something and have you guys all on and chat about it and promote it as well. But before all that, what do you got coming up? You got any conventions or anything else you want to talk about? Promote your links as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I will be at the Crossing Realms Conference in Missouri. I will be a special guest there September. Sometime in September. I don't remember the exact date. Hang on, I can tell you when the exact date is. It's in September. Let me see here. Where is it? Where's it? Hang on, I'm having a brain fart here. I'm trying to find it. Phone's not cooperating with me. It is September 19th and 20th in Richmond, Missouri. Crossing Realms Conference. I will be a special guest there. So if y'all are in and around Missouri, come hang out with us. There's going to be a lot of great speakers there, and it's going to be a good time. I've got another investigation that I've got planned out with a bunch of the guys that came out into my research area back earlier this year, where I was talking about earlier. We've got another investigation that we're going to do, try and film a little bit of that as well. I can't talk too much about it right now. It's a little hush hush, and I can kind of talk about what we done earlier this year, but not too much about it. But whenever this doc comes out, Operation Smoke, we'll definitely get back on here and talk about it fully. But I've got what else? I've got another conference this year, I think. I've got so much going on between work and kids and everything else. I can't keep up with it. I'm running around like a chicken with its head cut off.
I hear you, man. So where tell people where they can find you and all the information where they can keep up on all your stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. The best way to do it is probably my Facebook group, Bigfoot Reports and Data. It's like it is right here on my little screen. You answer questions and join. If you don't answer the questions, you're not going to get in. That's just how I roll. You just got to answer questions and get in and just be respectful. We'll have a good time in the group. I encourage any podcaster to come on there and join the group, share your content. I'm very much a loving person, and I love helping others promote their stuff. And Actually, Barnaby's a mod in my group, so he has the reins now to post his stuff in there. But Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, all under the same name right here. You can find me. Would love to chat if you're willing to chat. If you need somebody to listen, I'll listen. So can't thank everybody enough for tuning in. Thanks, and God bless.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. All the links to your YouTube and Instagram and the Facebook page are in the show notes for anybody that is interested. You can go click on those and check those out as well. But thank you so much, man. Like I said, we'll have you back, you and your crew, when you get your documentary out and released, and we can talk all about it and help you guys promote that. Love to have you. So,
absolutely, bro. Sounds good.
All right, man. You take care.
Howdy.
All right, guys, that is our show for this week. Thank you guys for tuning in. Remember to like, subscribe, and share all things here on the Untold Radio Network and Cryptids, Anomalies, and the Paranormal Society. Head on over to the Bigfoot reports and data. All the social media links for Harley's stuff is in the show notes. Make sure to give him a like, subscribe, and share as well. And if you get a chance, head on over to his conventions. And hopefully we will have him back for his documentary coming out real soon, guys. So take care. And until next time, I'll see you on the edge.